What if I told you that the playbook for building today's most dominant, disruptive companies wasn't written in Silicon Valley? What if it was written 800 years ago on the vast, windswept steppes of Asia? We're about to jump from the 13th century battlefield to the modern boardroom to decode the absolute operational genius of the Mongol Empire. It's a fair question, right? And you might be surprised, but the answer is, well, pretty much everything you need to know about how to win. We're about to see how the very strategies that built the largest land empire in history are, believe it or not, more relevant than ever. Because when you strip it all away, that's exactly what the Mongol Empire was. It was a startup. It was founded by Genghis Khan, and it went from a bunch of scattered, warring tribes to a global superpower with a speed and efficiency that is just terrifying. They didn't just enter the market, they remade it in their own image. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to break down the Mongols' entire system into 6 core principles, 6 plays from their book that you can actually apply to whatever you're trying to build today. First things first, you got to start with the founder. Genghis Khan's real genius wasn't just in conquering. It was in organization, in social engineering. He knew that the biggest threat wasn't some army over the horizon. It was the friction inside his own organization. So his first mission was solving the ultimate scaling challenge. How do you get a bunch of different people to work as one unstoppable machine? And this quote, this right here is the core of the entire Mongol mindset. They weren't interested in playing the game better than everyone else. They showed up and fundamentally rewrote the rulebook. Their strategy wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about achieving total, undeniable victory. This leads us straight into their first and maybe most important strategy: engineering the win long before a single arrow ever flew. You see, for the Mongols, a battle wasn't the start of a conflict. It was the final, bloody confirmation of a victory they had already secured through information dominance. They lived and breathed this ancient wisdom. For a Mongol general, having to fight a long, costly battle, even one they won, was seen as a failure of strategy, a disgrace, because it meant you didn't do your homework. And that homework was all about knowing absolutely everything about your opponent. And this is where it gets really incredible. They basically built the 13th century version of big data. This wasn't just sending a few scouts ahead. They had spies posing as merchants, they partnered with vast trade networks to gather geographic and political intel, and maybe most importantly, they mapped out the internal squabbles and political feuds of their enemies so they could exploit them. So, how does this translate to today? Well, this ancient model gives us a perfect framework for modern business. It's about knowing your market landscape inside and out, building networks to get real information, finding the weaknesses in your competitor's organization, and then making your moves based on hard data, not just hunches. That's how you win before the fight even starts. Okay, so you've got amazing intelligence. What's next? You need a team that can actually execute. An organization is only as strong as its structure and its culture. And let me tell you, the Mongols engineered both for pure, ruthless performance. And this is just brilliant in its simplicity. Genghis Khan completely shattered the old, unreliable tribal loyalties and reorganized everyone into this decimal system. A squad of 10, the Arban, was part of a company of 100, which was part of a regiment of 1,000, and so on. It's a fractal design, the same simple, accountable pattern at every single level. It made command and control absolutely seamless. But a great structure is useless without the right people in charge. And this is where the Mongols had a secret weapon, a radical culture of pure meritocracy. They did not care who your father was. They cared if you could get the job done. This meant a genius like General Subutai, the son of a blacksmith, could rise to command entire armies, while their enemies were often led by some unqualified noble who got the job through connections. Now, this culture was held together by a discipline that was, well, absolute and brutal. This rule right here is key. If one person in your squad of 10 ran away, all 10 of you were executed. Your life was literally tied to the person fighting next to you. And what that created was a level of cohesion that was basically unbreakable. The army didn't move like thousands of individuals. It moved like one single living thing. So you've got a disciplined, merit-based team. That's a powerful foundation. But the Mongols turned it into a weapon by adding 2 more critical elements: insane speed and perfect synchronization. They figured out how to collapse time and distance in a way nobody had ever seen. Get this, in the year 1241, during the invasion of Hungary, a Mongol army traveled 180 miles In just 3 days. Through deep snow. In the middle of winter. This was something their European enemies couldn't even comprehend. And how did they do it? Simple. Every soldier had a string of 3 to 5 spare horses, so they could switch to a fresh mount and just keep riding. This mobility wasn't just for getting from A to B. It was a devastating strategic weapon. So how do you coordinate armies moving that fast across an entire continent? You build the YAM. And this was so much more than a postal service. It was the empire's central nervous system, a network of relay stations that meant Mongol leaders had the highest information velocity in the world. They could get reports and send orders faster than anyone. And if this all sounds kind of familiar, well, you're absolutely right. Just look at this breakdown. The Yagam, that was their version of Slack or Microsoft Teams for long-distance communication. Signal flags and drums on the battlefield, that was their real-time Zoom call. And the Paisa, this metal tablet that granted a writer authority, that was their secure single sign-on, their two-factor authentication. They literally built the 13th century version of a fully synced-up, remote-first organization. All right, now for one of their most powerful weapons. One that didn't need any steel or horses. I'm talking about the ability to control the enemy's mind. The Mongols were absolute masters of psychological warfare, using an opponent's own pride, greed, and fear as weapons against them. Their signature move, their classic play, was the feigned retreat. This wasn't just a tactic. It was a brilliantly choreographed psychological trap. They'd attack, pretend to break and run in a panic, and then knew their enemies, full of arrogance, would break formation and chase them. Once the enemy was scattered, disorganized, and lured into the perfect spot, the trap would spring. The fleeing Mongols would turn, fresh reserves would appear on the flanks, and it was over. And you can use this exact same psychology in a modern negotiation. It's incredibly effective. You make a big concession early on, making the other side think they're winning, that they've got you on the ropes. You let them get emotionally invested in closing the deal. Then, once they're committed, you pivot and reintroduce your most important demands from a totally new position of strength. You control the game by seeming to lose it. Okay, let's bring this all home. We've talked about leadership, intelligence, team structure, speed, and psychological warfare. Let's pull all these threads together into a final takeaway you can use to build your own modern horde. This is the blueprint, right here. It's a system where the best ideas and the best people win, period. Where the speed of your decisions and your execution is your primary weapon. Where you act on data, not just feelings. It's about building a unified team, always adapting and controlling the story in your market. These rules are just as powerful today as they were 800 years ago. In the end, the Mongols didn't just conquer land. They created a system, a scalable, adaptable, ruthless system that allowed them to dominate for more than a century. They proved that a small, overlooked group with the right strategy and the right mindset can literally change the world. The playbook is now yours. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build with it?